Okay, so you've sent over a lot of material on the Israel-Hamas conflict. It's uh, it's a really complex topic, isn't it? It can feel overwhelming.
It definitely can be. There's just so much history, so many layers.
Right. So today, our mission is basically to cut through some of that density. We want to pull out the really essential insights for you, the listener. Think of it like a focused guide to understanding the core issues here.
Exactly. We'll try to cover the history, the key causes driving it, who the main players are.
The serious allegations flying around too, right? And the misinformation.
Yeah, absolutely. Misinformation is huge here. And then we'll look at, well, what might happen next? Any paths to de-escalation?
And it feels so urgent. I mean, the human costs mentioned in the overview, over 46,700 Palestinian deaths, around 1,200 Israeli deaths just in this latest war. It's staggering.
It really underscores why understanding the basics is crucial.
Okay, let's dive in. History first. It's a long story, so maybe we hit the main turning points.
Good idea. We probably need to start back in the late 19th, early 20th century. That's where you see Zionism really taking shape.
Which came about because of anti-Semitism in Europe.
Largely, yes. A powerful movement for a Jewish homeland. But at the same time, you had Palestinian nationalism growing among the people already living there for, well, centuries.
And they were worried about being displaced.
Understandably. So right away, you've got these competing claims, these two groups deeply connected to the same land. That's the setup.
Then comes the Balfour Declaration, 1917. That document seems to cast such a long shadow.
Oh, absolutely. Britain basically promised support for a Jewish national home in Palestine.
While also saying the rights of the existing non-Jewish communities shouldn't be harmed.
Exactly, those two promises. They were kind of contradictory from the get-go. Almost baked in the conflict, you could argue.
Fast forward to 1947, the UN Partition Plan. Another attempt to solve this, but it didn't go smoothly.
No. The UN proposed splitting Palestine, separate Arab and Jewish states, and Jerusalem under international control.
Jewish leaders accepted it.
They did, but Arab leaders rejected it completely. They saw it as, fundamentally unfair, dividing their homeland.
And that rejection led directly to war.
Yes, the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. For Palestinians, this is the Nakba, the catastrophe.
Because so many were displaced.
Around 700,000 Palestinians lost their homes, became refugees. Many ended up in Gaza, in neighboring countries. It's absolutely central to Palestinian identity and memory.
Okay, next big moment, 1967. The Six-Day War.
A massive turning point. Israel captured huge amounts of territory in just days.
Including Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem.
Exactly. And that's the start of the occupation that continues in many ways today. Millions of Palestinians living under Israeli military control.
And the settlements started after that.
Yes, the establishment of Israeli settlements in those occupied areas began, which is a major point of contention, considered illegal under international law.
Right. Then, late 80s, the first intifada breaks out. And a new major player emerges, Hamas.
Yeah, the Intifada was a widespread Palestinian uprising against the occupation. And in '87, Hamas was founded, growing out of the Muslim Brotherhood.
And their approach was different from the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization.
Very different. Hamas focused on armed resistance, rejecting any two-state solution outright. The PLO was, at that time, moving more towards diplomacy.
Hamas also built support through social programs.
Yes, that was key, especially in Gaza, providing services where maybe others weren't. It also highlights, the internal Palestinian divisions that have often complicated things.
Which brings us to Oslo, 1993. A moment of hope, maybe.
There was definitely hope. The Oslo Accords, signed by the PLO and Israel, were aimed directly at a two-state solution and negotiated peace.
But Hamas was completely against it.
Totally. They saw it as selling out Palestinian rights, recognizing Israel. They actively worked to undermine it with violence, like suicide bombings.
And then the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Rabin.
A huge blow. Rabin was key to Oslo. That, plus the Second Intifada starting around 2000, really slammed the door on that peace process.
Okay, then 2005, Israel pulls its soldiers and settlers out of Gaza. Unilateral.
Right, it wasn't negotiated. They left the inside of Gaza, but, and this is crucial, they kept control over the borders, the airspace, the sea access.
Except for the border with Egypt, Rafa.
Correct. But because Israel maintains so much external control, the UN and many others still consider Gaza occupied territory.
And around that time, Hamas gained political power in Gaza.
They won the Palestinian elections in 2006. Then in 2007, after fighting with Fatah, the party leading the PA, Hamas took full control of Gaza by force.
Which led to the blockade.
Yes.
Mhm.
Israel and Egypt imposed a tight blockade on Gaza, citing security concerns about Hamas.
Yeah.
And that blockade, with its humanitarian impact versus security claims, is still a major, major issue.
And since 2007, we've seen these recurring, devastating wars between Israel and Hamas.
Yeah, it's a tragic cycle. 2008-09, 2012, 2014, 2021. Hamas fires rockets into Israel.
And Israel responds with massive force in Gaza.
Exactly. Airstrikes, sometimes ground invasions, and the impact on civilians in Gaza, which is so densely populated, is just catastrophic every single time, worsening an already bad humanitarian situation.
Which leads us right up to October 7th, 2023, the Hamas attack and the current war.
The scale of that attack was unprecedented. Around 1,200 Israelis killed, over 250 taken hostage, just horrific.
And Israel's response in Gaza has also been unprecedented in scale.
Utterly devastating. The reported death toll, over 46,700 Palestinians by May 2025. Near total displacement. It's a brutal chapter built on decades of unresolved issues.
So that's the grim history. Let's try and unpack the causes more deeply. What keeps this cycle going?
Well, it's a tangle of things, really. First, you've got the fundamental disagreement about land.
Palestinians wanting a state on the pre-1967 lines, Gaza, West Bank, East Jerusalem.
Right, but Israel controls those areas, continues settlement building in the West Bank, blockades Gaza, and then you have Hamas, whose core ideology rejects Israel's existence entirely. They want all of it.
So territorial disputes are key. But it's more than just land, you said. Ideology plays a huge role.
Absolutely. Hamas's view is rooted in Islamism. They see armed struggle, jihad, as the way to liberate Palestine, establish an Islamic state.
Which is diametrically opposed to Israel's goal.
Which is ensuring its security and its existence as a Jewish democratic state. These goals, as they stand now, seem totally incompatible.
Let's go back to the Gaza blockade. It's such a constant source of tension.
It really is. Israel says it's purely for security, stopping weapons, materials for tunnels, things like that.
But the criticism is that it punishes everyone in Gaza.
Exactly. International groups call it collective punishment. It strangles the economy, limits movement for medical care, education, basic goods. It creates this ongoing humanitarian crisis.
And from the Israeli side, there's the constant threat of rocket attacks from Gaza.
Which Israel sees as terrorism, plain and simple. Indiscriminate attacks on civilians, causing fear, disruption, death.
While Hamas calls it resistance.
Resistance against occupation and the blockade. Again, completely opposing views on the same actions.
What about the regional powers? Iran's role comes up a lot.
Iran is a major backer of Hamas. Financially, militarily, estimates are around $100 million a year.
Why? What's Iran's goal?
It's part of their broader strategy to counter Israel and U.S. influence in the region. Supporting groups like Hamas serves that purpose.
And Israel sees Iran as a fundamental threat because of this.
As an existential threat, yes. Iran's support for Hamas just pours fuel on the fire.
And all the peace efforts over the years, Oslo, Camp David, Annapolis, they've all failed. Why?
So many reasons. Deep mistrust built up over decades, Hamas consistently rejecting diplomacy and using violence.
And Israeli actions like settlement expansion don't help build trust either.
Definitely not. Palestinians see settlements as Israel actively taking the land needed for their future state, undermining the whole idea of a two-state solution. Rabin's assassination was also a critical blow.
Does the situation inside Gaza, the poverty, unemployment, play a role?
Hugely. Gaza has incredibly high unemployment, poverty, population density. It's a pressure cooker. That kind of desperation and hopelessness makes people more open to radical groups like Hamas that promise resistance or change, however violent.
In Jerusalem, it seems like whenever something happens there, especially around the holy sites, things explode.
Yes, Jerusalem is incredibly sensitive. The Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, Temple Mount, for Jews, it's sacred to both. Any perceived threat or change to the status quo there
Can be used as a trigger.
easily. Hamas often uses incidents in Jerusalem to rally support and justify attacks. It's a recurring flashpoint.
Okay, so we've got history, causes. It's a really complex picture. To navigate it, who are the absolute key players we need to keep in mind?
Well, obviously, Israel is central. Their main goals are security, dismantling Hamas's military wing, stopping attacks.
But they face a lot of criticism internationally.
Yes, for disproportionate force in Gaza, the blockade's impact, the settlements in the West Bank, serious accusations.
Then there's Hamas, governing Gaza, but designated a terrorist group by many.
Right. Their role involves controlling Gaza, firing rockets, fighting Israel, and that core rejection of Israel's existence. They face accusations, too, targeting civilians, using human shields, political repression in Gaza.
What about the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, Fatah?
The PA, led by Fatah, is the internationally recognized Palestinian leadership. They officially support a two-state solution through negotiation.
But they don't control Gaza.
No, their influence is limited to parts of the West Bank. This split between Hamas and Fatah is a major weakness for the Palestinians.
Egypt's role seems important, sharing that border.
Crucial. Egypt often mediates ceasefires, but they also help enforce the blockade on their side.
Why don't they support the Palestinians?
It's complicated. Egypt has its own security concerns about Hamas, seeing links to the Muslim Brotherhood, which is banned in Egypt, so it's a balancing act for them.
We mentioned Iran's support for Hamas. That's a key factor.
Definitely. The money, the weapons, the training, it significantly boosts Hamas's capabilities and is part of Iran's bigger regional game against Israel and the West.
And the U.S., always a major player as Israel's main ally.
The U.S. provides huge amounts of military aid and diplomatic backing to Israel. Critics say this makes it hard for the U.S. to be seen as a neutral mediator and that Palestinian concerns get overlooked.
Qatar is interesting. They give aid to Gaza but also mediate.
Yes, Qatar provides a lot of financial aid for Gaza, helping run things. They've also been really important in mediating hostage releases and ceasefires.
But they get criticized for supporting Hamas.
Some argue the funding indirectly helps Hamas stay in power. Yeah, it's another complex role.
And Hezbollah in Lebanon, another Iran-backed group.
Right. Hezbollah is allied with Hamas. They sometimes launch attacks on northern Israel, which shows how this conflict can spill over regionally. They're a significant force.
And briefly, other actors involved. The UN, EU.
Yeah, the UN provides aid, passes resolutions. The EU does too. Regional countries like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, they all have stakes and get involved diplomatically or with aid. It's a crowded field.
With all this conflict comes immense suffering and also really serious allegations of crimes, atrocities. What does the overview say about those?
It's grim reading, frankly. For Hamas, the focus is heavily on October 7th, the killings, torture, rape allegations, hostage-taking. That led to ICC arrest warrants.
And the rocket attacks on Israeli civilians.
Yes, indiscriminate rocket fire is a long-standing accusation. Also using human shields, allegedly operating in civilian areas, and executing political opponents in Gaza.
And the accusations against Israel.
Equally serious. Using disproportionate force in Gaza, leading to massive civilian casualties, women, children. Strikes on protected places like hospitals, schools, potential war crimes.
The blockade, too.
Yes, the blockade's humanitarian impact has led to accusations of possibly using starvation as a weapon of war. That's part of the ICC investigation.
And there were genocide allegations.
Yes, though the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, hasn't made a final ruling on genocide itself, it did order Israel to prevent genocidal acts.
And actions in the West Bank.
Also under scrutiny. Killings. Home demolitions, displacing people, accusations of forcible transfer, even apartheid from some rights groups.
And the ICC and ICJ have taken concrete steps.
Yes. In November 2024, the ICC issued those arrest warrants for Netanyahu, Gallant, and Hamas leader Def for alleged war crimes. And in July 2024, the ICJ ruled Israel's occupation itself is illegal under international law.
These are major legal developments on the international stage.
They absolutely are. They show how seriously the international community views these allegations.
In a conflict this charged, conspiracy theories and misinformation must run rampant. What examples did the overview highlight?
Oh, definitely. One persistent one is that Israel actually created Hamas back in the day to weaken the PLO.
Is there any truth to that?
Well, Israel did allow Hamas's precursor, an Islamic charity, to operate initially. But the idea that Israel created Hamas as a militant group, there's no real evidence for that. It simplifies Hamas' origins in the Muslim Brotherhood and the Intifada.
What about Iran orchestrating October 7th to stop Israel-Saudi normalization?
That's been speculated about a lot. Iran obviously supports Hamas and opposes normalization. But direct proof that Iran planned or ordered that specific attack, it hasn't surfaced publicly. Hamas seems to operate independently, even with Iranian backing.
And social media just fuels the fire with bad info.
Massively. Old videos reused, fake captions, you see it all the time. Things designed to provoke anger or blame someone, like blaming Biden or Qatar for things using totally unrelated clips. The AP and others debunk this stuff constantly.
The Gaza hospital blast in 2023 was a big example of conflicting stories, too.
Right, Al-Ali Hospital. Immediately, Hamas blamed an Israeli airstrike. Israel said it was a misfired rocket from Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
Did we ever find out for sure?
U.S. and French intelligence analysis seemed to support Israel's version, but there was no definitive, independent confirmation. It just shows how hard it is to verify facts in the fog of war and how narratives get shaped instantly.
A good reminder that these theories often have political motives and lack real evidence. Okay, looking forward. It feels bleak. What are the future prospects? Any potential solutions mentioned?
The challenges are huge, no doubt. Hamas seems committed to armed struggle, even if their charter had some tweaks. Israel's policies, settlements, blockade, military actions keep fueling anger.
Regional instability, Iran's role.
Exactly. And the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is just catastrophic. It breeds desperation. All these make finding a solution incredibly difficult.
But are there any potential paths forward discussed? The two-state solution keeps coming up.
It's still the main framework internationally, an independent Palestine next to Israel, based roughly on 1967 borders with land swaps.
But that would require so much.
Mutual recognition, ending violence completely, real negotiations on the toughest issues, borders, Jerusalem, refugees. It's a massive uphill climb right now.
What about in the shorter term? Ceasefires.
Absolutely critical. Immediate ceasefires, like the brief one mediated in January 2025, are vital for aid to get in, for hostage and prisoner exchanges.
But a ceasefire alone isn't enough.
No, you need sustained aid, a real easing of the blockade for any stability. Just stopping the fighting temporarily doesn't solve the underlying problems.
Could international oversight help?
Potentially. Monitoring ceasefires, ensuring aid gets distributed fairly, that could maybe build a tiny bit of trust.
And tackling the root causes.
It's essential. Ending the blockade, stopping settlements, finding a path to Palestinian self-determination. Plus, accountability for war crimes via the ICC might deter future atrocities.
What about regional diplomacy, like the Abraham Accords?
Those deals normalizing relations between Israel and some Arab states could help stabilize the region, but
They need to include progress for Palestinians.
exactly. If they ignore Palestinian rights, they probably won't lead to lasting peace in this specific conflict. Potential Saudi-Israel normalization faces the same challenge.
So many interconnected challenges. The overview uses a phrase, rihai par upe, escaping the cycle. What concrete steps does it suggest?
Short term, it's about basics. Honoring ceasefires, releasing hostages and prisoners, letting humanitarian aid flow freely.
And intense mediation.
Yes, Egypt, Qatar, the UN need to be deeply involved. And crucially, both sides must follow international humanitarian law, protect civilians. Don't use them as shields.
And longer term.
Revive real negotiations on the two-state solution, tackling the big issues, borders, Jerusalem, refugees. Invest massively in Gaza's economy with neutral oversight to give people hope.
Normalize Israel-Arab relations, but link it to Palestinian rights.
Yes, and pursue justice for war crimes through the ICC. Deterrence is key.
What's the role of the rest of the world in all this?
The global community needs to apply consistent pressure on both sides to stop the fighting and follow international law, provide sustained aid and reconstruction support.
And fight misinformation.
Critically important, help foster informed public understanding, not just knee-jerk reactions based on fake news.
This overview seems incredibly thorough, but it also mentions limitations. The difficulty of getting 100% accuracy. Why is that so hard here?
Well, several big reasons. First, bias is everywhere. Sources often lean pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian, even if they claim neutrality. It's hard to find purely objective accounts.
Access is also a problem.
Huge problem. Getting independent journalists or investigators into Gaza, especially during conflict, is incredibly difficult. Verifying claims on the ground is tough.
And things change so fast.
Exactly. The situation is constantly evolving. What's reported one day might be outdated the next. And fundamentally, it's just so complex. History, politics, religion, all tangled up. There's rarely one simple truth everyone agrees on.
So our goal here wasn't claiming absolute truth, but presenting a balanced picture based on reliable sources.
Precisely. Using sources like Britannica, Council on Foreign Relations, BBC, UN reports, trying to reflect both Israeli and Palestinian perspectives, acknowledging the complexities, and being cautious about unverified claims or conspiracy theories.
Okay, we've covered an enormous amount of ground. Let's try and distill the main takeaways for you listening.
We've really journeyed through, over a century of history, looked at the deep, tangled roots of this conflict land. Ideology, security, fears.
Identify the key players, from Israel and Hamas to regional powers like Iran and Egypt, and global ones like the U.S.
Faced the devastating human cost, the terrible allegations of war crimes on all sides. Talked about the challenge of misinformation clouding everything.
And explored the potential, very difficult paths forward: ceasefires, aid, negotiations, accountability.
Yeah, it's starkly clear this is a tragedy with deep historical roots, fueled by conflicting claims and ideologies, causing immense suffering for both Israelis and Palestinians.
Absolutely. The suffering is just undeniable on both sides.
And maybe, something for you to think about after this is the long-term psychological impact. Generations on both sides have grown up surrounded by this conflict, this trauma.
How did that shade people's views, their ability to even imagine peace?
Exactly. Understanding that deep-seated trauma, that collective memory on both sides, might be crucial if there's ever going to be a chance for real reconciliation down the road. It's not just about politics or land. It's about healing deep wounds.
That's a really powerful thought to end on. Thanks for exploring all this with me today.